A junkie named Kenny is heading to an alleyway to meet a dealer called Reggie. When he meets at the place, a dark silhouette is looming in the shadows and Kenny assumes it's Reggie, but he then screams in terror when the silhouette comes face to face with him. The Doctor is in the middle of cleaning the TARDIS, admiring the hard work he has undertaken. Before he makes his way to clean the swimming pool, the console strangely picks an unknown signal and the Doctor curiously sets the coordinates. In a rundown apartment block, Iowa model Louisa Shepard is auditioning for a motion picture by sibling entrepreneurs Kane and Milo Gott. They liked her audition and agree to cast her in their movie 3-in-1. Unbeknownst to her, the movie is a pornographic one. The Gott brothers introduce Louisa to the other cast members Eric Hansen and Roxanne Maxwell. The Gott brothers start preparing the shoot and ask the actors to prepare for an orgy scene set in a master bedroom. Louisa becomes alarmed by this and tries walk out the production. Milo intercepts and tells her that she'll be a star, being on the silver screen and gaining recognition as an actress. Louisa reluctantly agrees and proceeds to strip off when the cameras were on. The TARDIS lands in an alleyway in Los Angeles, 1979, and the Doctor steps out to survey his surroundings to locate the signal. He discovers Kenny on the ground nearby having a seizure and foaming from the mouth. He performs hands-only CPR but fails to revive Kenny and dies quickly. The Doctor quickly races to the TARDIS phone and calls the emergency services. An ambulance crew turns up and takes Kenny's body away. The Doctor overhears a conversation between the paramedics about multiple deaths about a new drug on the scene called Tempest. While in the area, the Doctor observes some graffiti on the walls behind a 7-Eleven saying "Bloodsuckers beware," and the Doctor quickly realizes that vampires are around. After filming the orgy scene, the cast take a break to wipe off the semen off their bodies. They have a beer, cigarette and snort a line of cocaine. Louisa looks over to the Gott brothers talking to an overweight Asian man in a suit and trench coat. The man later leaves and the Gott brothers' attitudes change from fun-loving enthusiasts to no-nonsense sergeant majors angrily demanding the actors to carry on with the film shoot. The Doctor, still wondering what vampires are doing in this area, he heads to a bar called Gecko's. When he walks through the bar door, the atmosphere is quiet and the regulars are all black Americans who gave stern stares at the Doctor. He sits on a bar stool and asks the bartender for a drink. The bartender gave a scowl and tells him to leave because of his skin color. The Doctor stands his ground and asks a simple question. "Are you hiding from the Night Walkers?" The bartender berates the Doctor about this childish joke, but the Doctor notices a tattoo in the style of a Rorschach test on the bartender's left wrist and utters the word "bloodsucker." The bartender then hissed, revealing his fangs along with the rest of the regulars, and the Doctor quickly maneuvers himself, runs out of the bar and gets chased by the vampires through the streets. He evades them by climbing over a wired fence. The Doctor takes a breather after the encounter. Later he heads to the same 7-Eleven with the "Bloodsuckers beware" graffiti scroll. He goes and buys a drink. At the counter the clerk looked dead-eyed. His skin was pale and was slowly licking his lips. The Doctor notices 2 fang marks on his neck. He quickly gave a witty remark and tries to leave but gets intercepted by 2 women in blue scrubs. He tells them to leave the store but gets knocked out by the clerk with a baseball bat. The 2 women approach the clerk in a flirty way and proceed to peck his cheek and lips. Filming on 3-in-1 had finished because of the Gott brothers' furious and relentless commitment to finish it. Louisa and Roxanne later came up after the rented equipment was packed away and asked if they were okay. They shrugged off their responses and said it's business related, they don't need to know about it. They walk off, leaving the actresses in the lurch. Roxanne persuades Louisa to join her for a few drinks back at her apartment, which is 2 floors up. She agrees. The Doctor slowly wakes from his knockout only to find himself in a dog cage which is padlocked. He shakes the cage like a gorilla. Suddenly a wooden stick slaps down on the cage to silence the Doctor. More people in blue scrubs emerge and observe the cages. In the other cages were dogs, big and small, looking scared and shaking. The one of the Doctor's left side was a terrier. It was lying lifeless with tufts of its fur taken out, and the Doctor was trying fathom what vampires and dogs have to do this. One of the vampires comes to the Doctor's cage and looks at him gravely. His name was Carol and he used to be a hospital porter. He tells the Doctor that a resurgence is growing and anything flesh and blood will get an upgrade to live longer with a bloodthirst. Carol then commands a few trainee nurses to fetch one of the stray dogs out of the cage. They hauled this dog out and placed it on a metal morgue table, brought out a needle with blood in it and injects it into the dog. The dog starts whimpering and shaking violently. The doctor stares at the transformation from his cage and the dog stops. Carol and his entourage step back to witness their experiment. Louisa and Roxanne are listening to music and drinking beer. There was a knock on the door and Roxanne heads over. The overweight Asian man was standing in the hallway and asked to be let in. He walks in with Kane and Milo following behind him. He introduces himself as Big Wong, a local crime boss who was in league with the Gott brothers who supplies them with cocaine. Kane and Milo's faces were battered and bruised. Big Wong states they hadn't paid him for the cocaine and he sent his goons round to cough up. Big Wong came up close to them in a sleazy sexual manner and proceed with small talk, but the girls weren't having any of it. Kane pleads to him not to harm them, but Big Wong shouts at him and pulls a .44 caliber on him. He continues to plead only for Big Wong to shoot his brains out all over the wall. Milo is distraught about his murder and tries to tackle Big Wong but suffers the same fate as his brother. Big Wong then points it at the girls and instructs them to come with him. The doctor kept watching the transformation. The dog's anatomy was stretching, become more humanoid. The claws were growing longer, sharp teeth like knives, and the height was extended more like a basketball player. Carol was gleefully pleased about this, and once it began climb of the morgue table, he quickly brings the doctor's sonic screwdriver to try and control the creature. It settles and stares at the shiny object. The doctor held his right palm out where his ring was, and then the sonic screwdriver started to jerk in his direction and quickly shot out of Carol's hand to the cage. The doctor grabs it quickly and unlocks the cage. He makes it out of the morgue and Carol and his entourage chase him. The doctor finds himself on the rooftop and hides. Carol heads out and finds the doctor hiding behind a vent. He uses Aikido, but Carol is quite flexible than he was and forcefully places the doctor over a ledge. The doctor berates Carol for experimenting on animals, but he laughs in his face. He jokingly slips out that Reggie's getting rich from this, and then the doctor grabs his ankle and pulls him off the rooftop. He lands in the back of a pickup truck with a picket fence piercing his chest, killing him off instantly. His entourage then scream in pain as they were psychically linked to him, causing them to be weakened in state. At a last-minute decision, they inject the blood into the caged dogs and free them onto the street. The doctor returns to the streets and heads off back to where the TARDIS is located. He approaches it, but a vagrant was sitting front of the doors binge drinking out of a brown paper bag, and the doctor in a commanding manner asks the vagrant to move away from his ship. The vagrant refuses but offers the doctor to get him some Tempest. The doctor, in need of an answer for this drug sweep, asks him where can he buy any. The vagrant drunkenly laughs at first and tells of an African American hippie called Reggie Maud. He also tells him that he does regular deals at a warehouse nearby and that he needs to have plenty of cash when in that particular area. Big Wong places Roxanne and Louisa into a white van. A bald Asian man in a suit with sunglasses is at the driver's wheel and two more are in the back armed with pistols. Big Wong says he needs to stop somewhere first and then deal with business back at his place. As the girls enter the van, he gropes their asses with a perverted cheesy grin and follows them in the back. The doctor heads to the warehouse where Reggie does his contact dealings. While he's waiting, he surveys the wooden crates and suspects that this is the Tempest shipment that Carol had mentioned before his demise. Reggie then shows up behind the doctor and offers him a variety of drugs to buy, from cocaine, cannabis and some leftover LSD. The doctor inquires about Tempest. Reggie slowly gets in a panic and tries to interrogate the doctor if he was working for the feds or is a crime boss trying to steal his shipment. The doctor denies all those things and the mention of vampires come out. Reggie pulls out a switchblade out his pocket and proceeds to slice the skin off his right arm, revealing a skeletal-like three-fingered arm. The doctor asks how long he's been on Earth for. Reggie said he fled his home world from corruption. His space pod crashed in the Nevada desert a year ago and took the skin of a lone highway patrolman called Reggie Maud and adopted his identity. The doctor then asks how he obtained the Tempest drug. Reggie discreetly mentions that it was from a planet that its military division were experimenting on a serum to regenerate soldiers' health that later became defunct and somehow he casually obtained from a dealer. The doctor deepens his discussion on how vampires are involved in all of this, and Reggie's response was that he tampered with it by adding a sample of bile from a vampire that he said it smelled acidic and funky. The discussion broadens. It's revealed when during an adventure with a past incarnation a gangly bat spawn latched itself onto the TARDIS exterior unbeknownst to the Doctor or his companion, and when flying through the vortex the bat spawn got thrown off only to land in Nevada 1978. It later grew into a human-like figure but was extremely weak due to the Earth's atmosphere and died just after a week. Reggie in his new skin found it on the side of a highway and later extracted some of its blood to form this new version of Tempest. Big Wong's white van then turns up and he emerges out greeting Reggie with open arms. The Doctor is just standing in the background but Big Wong then turns to him, asks if he's taking his shipment. The Doctor denies this but Big Wong starts getting tetchy with him and quickly turns to Reggie with shock on his face. Reggie's three-fingered is showing and Big Wong puts the gun to his head. Roxanne and Louisa stick their heads out of the van and shout at the Doctor for help. Big Wong shouts at them to be silent but this distraction gives Reggie the upper hand. Pulls out a switchblade and stabs Big Wong in his stomach. He lands to the ground and Reggie starts kicking him to death plus adding racial remarks to him. Nearby a couple of police officers are sitting in their patrol car drinking coffee and eating donuts. Both men were surveying for any crimes and keeping the peace. Suddenly the patrol car's roof caved in and both officers scrambled out only to witness one of the Tempest-injected dogs. Then it pounces on one of them and rips into shreds. The other officer shoots with his firearm at it until it falls to the ground. He looks at his partner disgusted and horrified at the remains. A sound collage of barking and howling then swamps the area and more the injected dogs start emerging out all over the place like rats. The police officer runs away in fear. Reggie picks up Big Wong's gun and points it at the bald-suited Asian men, asking the girls to be freed. They refuse, so Reggie lets fire on them, killing all three, and Roxanne and Louisa leap out of the van. Reggie then puts the gun at the Doctor's face and slyly moves to the warehouse entrance. He leaves him along with Roxanne and Louisa. The Doctor introduces himself to them and before starting a reassuring conversation the injected dogs emerge from the shadows and surround the three in a circle. The Doctor was fumbling with his pockets looking for something. He brings the sonic screwdriver. He was hesitant to use it but didn't have any other choice. He twists to bottom end of the sonic and tells Roxanne and Louisa to cover their ears. He holds the sonic in the air and a ear-piercing sound is released. The injected dogs squeal and shake until their heads explode like a lasagna in a microwave. The Doctor turns the sonic off with remorse, thinking he couldn't had to do it but there wasn't any options. He turns to Roxanne and Louisa standing like lemons covered in blood, fur and bits of brain tissue. Then the Doctor hears a beeping sound coming from the crates. He sees the remains of Reggie's pod. He knows where that signal had come from and proceeds to burn the leftover shipment of Tempest. The Doctor now needs to bring Reggie to justice before he escapes. Reggie was skipping and singing through the street. The remaining scrub-wearing vampires approached him, weakened by the death of Carol. Reggie hands them something capsule-like and they intake it. Reggie smiles devilishly at them. The vampires start spewing out dark fluid and start steaming out of their bodies. Reggie looks on as the vampires melt into fluid and cover the sidewalk. Reggie steps over the puddles and continues to move on. The surviving police officer shows up and tells him to stop because he had seen everything from afar. Reggie puts his hands up in a comic fashion and says they were only garlic tablets. The officer doesn't believe this and proceeds to point his gun at him. Reggie thrusts himself at the officer only to get shot in the chest and dies on the concrete. The Doctor, Louisa and Roxanne quickly arrive. The Doctor observes Reggie's corpse and then looks at the police officer. The officer had seen some strange and brutal deaths tonight which made him crazy. He lost his partner, got chased by the injected dogs and witnessed vampires melted into green goo. Louisa and Roxanne notice Reggie's body was deflating like a balloon. The Doctor says that Reggie's alien form was disintegrating, leaving the stolen skin covering what remains. The two girls and the officer were disgusted by this. The Doctor says that unit will clean this mess and walks off as there wasn't anything else he can do. Louisa, bemused by the events of tonight, watches the Doctor pass them and head off into the night. She approaches Roxanne and before she could say a word to her, a guy walks up next to Roxanne. The guy smugly and rudely tells her what a mess she's in. Roxanne tells the guy that she's had enough of what's happened tonight, but the guy just ignorantly ignored her and grabbed her by the wrist. The guy and Roxanne head off back to Roxanne's apartment. Louisa watched and Roxanne looked back to her, waved and quietly tell her to go. Louisa headed off in the opposite direction, unsure of herself. The Doctor heads to the alleyway where the TARDIS is. The vagrant had left much to the Doctor relief and proceeds to enter the TARDIS. Louisa stops him entering in only to say thanks. The Doctor appreciates it and says goodbye to leave on another adventure. Louisa looked at his ship and questions him. He says it blends in any environment it lands. She laughs and say that it's America not England. The Doctor says it's only a fault that he needs fixing but often gets sidelined with stuff. Louisa cheekily asks if there's a bathroom on board. The Doctor says yes but directs her to the alleyway. Louisa changes her tune and says she's desperate. The Doctor grudgingly agrees and lets her in. Louisa walked through the TARDIS doors and was confused and baffled by the console room. The console room was large. Through the police doors there were steps leading to this hexagonal piece of machinery in the middle of this large room. The walls were wooden with bookshelves built in and the roundels formed a pattern around it. Bookshelf then roundels then bookshelf. There was an upstairs area with a metal balcony railing and stained glass windows circling round. The console itself was made of wooden with metal parts giving a steampunk feel and was filled with levers, gauges and jumbled loose wires hanging all over the place. The rotor was glowing a light blue and 6 small lights surround the console from above. The console was also hanging from the ceiling. Nothing was holding the console from below, instead shows a light with the seal of Rassilon shining down on the ground. Around the console was an armchair with a table and a wooden trunk. While Louisa searched for the bathroom in the TARDIS, the Doctor heads to the console, flips a couple of switches and pulls a lever. The TARDIS starts shaking and rattling. Then the wheezing sound comes into play and the TARDIS dematerializes out of the alleyway leaving a small cosmic cloud.